Good morning. Today is Monday. Today we are starting Seches Eiruvin. Baruch Hashem. Yesterday we finished Shabbos. Today we're moving on to Eiruvin. It's 10 Prakim. I think it's 10 Prakim. Yeah, 10 Prakim. Eiruvin will take us for this week and most of next week. This week we'll do five. Next week we'll do five. And we'll start after that Pesachim at the end of next week. Baruch Hashem. Okay, today's shiur is sponsored by Nishmas. Our Nachum ben Simcha Cohen, Rishon Mordechai ben Shep, so Bracha Sarva Shmolei ben Moshe ben Yosef. May the Neshamas will have an aliyah and Fush them for Ada Sarva Sleh Chana Pesel Bas Yenta, Yisrael ben Rachel Leah and Rachel Bas Pesel Zelda, Avram Yitzchak ben Risha and Chaya Bas Doba Bela. Fush them Pesel Shar Chali Yisrael. Okay, here we go. As we started up at Masechah Shabbos, we discussed the four shiurs, the four domains. You have Rosh Hashanah, which is a private domain. You have Rosh Harabim, which is a public domain. You have a Carmelis, which is a in between a public and private, and you have a Makpator, which is an exempt area. And we're going to learn a lot about these things throughout this Masechta, and then we also have to talk about when you talk about a private domain. Talk about you have a mavoi, which is an alleyway. Back in the day, they not like nowadays where you have houses that open up right into the street. You had houses. You had a bunch of houses that opened up into a courtyard, and then the courtyard opened up into an alleyway, and the alleyway fed its way into a main street. As you'll see, like in this picture here, I think it's coming out clear. You have the houses, then you have they open up into the courtyard, and then into the alleyway, and then into the road. And that's very nogea for Eiruvin. Okay, let's get into Perek. Now, these prakim are a little bit longer than Shabbos. Most of the prakim in Shabbos were short. These are longer, so we're going to do the best we can to keep this as concise as possible and still stay on time. Okay, here we go. Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph, Maseches Eiruvin, mavoi. Now, so you had. Okay, so you're allowed to carry in Rosh Hashanah. You're not allowed to carry in Rosh Hashanah. And so the question is, what about the alleyway? So on the deraisa level, it's us to carry in the alleyway. But now the Chachamim came along and made, they set up such as an Eruv, which allows you to carry from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah and vice versa. And we're gonna be talking about the alleyway during this most of this chapter. So, mavoi shehu gavoa the malam me'asim ama. If in order to set up an alleyway, you have to put in like a doorpost. The doorpost has a crossbeam and etimazuzos. So if the crossbeam of an alley is more than 20 amos above the ground, you must lower it. It may not be higher than 20 amos because it is meant to serve as a sign indicating that the alleyway is not a public domain, and the sign that is more and a simon that is more than 20 amos high is ineffective because people will not notice it. Where else do we have this concept of 20 amos? You have it by sukkah has to be lower than 20 amos, and you also have by Chanukah has to be lower than 20 amos, which would be other 10 tvachim. And there's one or two other places I think it is, but we'll get to that at a different time. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Hey, no, tzarich is not necessary to lower the crossbeam." According to Rabbi Yehuda, the crossbeam is not a siman, which must be noticeable, but rather it's a mechitza that closes off the open side of the alley, and for this purpose, it is effective even if it's higher than 20 amos, according to Rabbi Yehuda. The harachov, haracha min asaramos, and if it is wider, if the entrance to the alleyway is wider than 10 amos, then you must make it narrower until it's 10 amos wide or less. An opening that exceeds 10 amos is too wide to be considered a halachic Pesach. Rather, it is just a breach in the alleyways surrounding walls. As such, it cannot be fixed with a crossbeam or a pole because those adjustments are valid only for a Pesach, or an entranceway. However, if the alleyways open side has the form of a doorway, meaning that there's a post, a mezuzah on both sides, not the mezuzah meaning the cloth. Mezuzah's beisecha means the post, the door posts. So if it has a post on the sides and a crossbeam that extends that goes across the top, that alpha pishu even if the opening is wider than 10 amos, he does not need to make it narrower because the source of Pesach is there, no matter how wide it is. Mishnah Beis. Then we have machlokas now as to the adjustments that are needed to convert an alleyway into one where carrying is mutter. Heksher mavoi. So this is how you fix, how you remedy, how you modify the alleyway to make it mutter to carry. Beishamai says lechi kora, both a pole at one side of the entranceway and a crossbeam over the entrance are necessary. Beis Hillel says lechi kora, you need one or the other, you don't need both. And Eliezer says that the chayayin, that Beis Shammai requires two poles, one at each side of the entrance. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael, Amar Talmud Echel, that Rabbi Akiva, the student said in the name of Rabbi Yishmael before Rabbi Akiva, Lo Nachal Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai Beis Hillel did not disagree. Mavoi Shu Pachos Mi'arba Amos, regarding an alley that is less than 4 amos wide. Shehu Nitar Balechi Obakor, that it can be considered permissible to carry with either a pole or a crossbeam. Even Beis Shammai accept that in such a narrow alley, either adjustment is noticeable on its own. Therefore, you don't need to go through all this trouble. Amen. Regarding what case then did they disagree? They disagreed whether regarding an alley that is between 4 and 10 amos wide, because Beis Shammai says, since the entrance is relatively wide, both a pole and a crossbeam are necessary. But Beis Hillel says, even in this case, either a pole or a crossbeam suffices. However, Rabbi Akiva did not accept this limitation of this dispute. Rabbi Akiva said, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai disagree regarding both this, meaning a narrower alley that's more narrow than 4 amos, and at an alley that is between 4 and 10 amos wide. But Beis Shammai requiring the two adjustments even at the entrance of a narrow alley, and Beis Hillel does not. Mishnah Gimel. Hakora she'amru, the crossbeam in which it was the Chachamim we're talking about, Rachva kedei lekabel hariyach, must be wide enough to hold a type of brick called an ariach. Ariach chatzi levena shel shlosha tvachim. And then ariach is half as wide as a levena, which is a brick that is 3 tvachim wide by 3 tvachim long. Therefore, an ariach is a brick 1.5 tvachim wide by 3 tvachim long. However, the cross beam itself does not need to be a full 1.5 tvachim wide. Rather, it is enough for the cross beam to be 1 tefach wide. So that it can hold an ariach lengthwise, with the length of the ariach lying along the length of the beam and overlapping it a little on each side. 1 tefach of the ariach's width sits directly on the beam, and 1/4 tefach of the ariach's width extends past each side of the beam. You got that? Good. We're going to test you on it later. Mishnah Dalet. The cross must be wide enough to support an ariach, and also strong enough to support an ariach. It has to be wide enough. It's going to be strong enough. To change the status of the alley, the crossbeam must be capable of supporting a permanent structure, and for that purpose, width alone does not suffice. Rather, the crossbeam must also have necessary strength. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Rachva afa pisha and bria." The crossbeam was wide enough to support the ariach. It is effective even if it is not strong enough to support one. He says you only need one. Okay, Mishnah Hey. Haisa shalkash or shalkanim. If the crossbeam was made of straw or reeds and is therefore unable to support an ariach, rowan oso ki'ilu hi shamateches. We view it as if it was made of metal, which can support an ariach. Akuma rowan oso ki'ilu hi pishuta. Similarly, if the crossbeam is bent such that an ariach would fall off of it, we view it as though it were straight. Hagula rowan osa ilu himubas. And if it is round, like a cylinder, like a pole, and therefore an ariach would roll off of it, we view it as though it were square with a flat surface. In order for any beam to be effective, its width must be at least 1 tefach, as we just learned in Mishnah Gimel. But how do you calculate the width of a round beam based on its circumference? We're going to learn that now. Anything that's a circumference of 3 tvachim, has a diameter of 1 tefach. Therefore, the circumference of a round beam must be at least 3 tvachim, so that its width will meet the required minimum. Okay, Mishnah Vav. L'chayayin shalamrud, the poles of which the Chachamim spoke, Gavan asar tvachim, their height must be at least 10 tvachim. The Rachban Avian Kol Shehu, while their width and thickness can be anything. Since the walls of the alley are high, the poles must have that height as well, but there is no minimum requirement for their width or thickness. Rabbi Yossi says, Rachban Shlosha Tvachim, their width must be at least 3 tvachim, because otherwise they would not be significant. Mishnah Zayin, the kol osin l'chayayin. We may make the poles out of anything. Even a living creature, an animal that is at least 10 tvachim tall, tied to the side of an alley, has the same effect as a pole. The animal must be bound so that it does not run away. In addition, it must be tied to prevent it from crouching and lowering its height less than 10 tvachim, for we are concerned that should it run away or crouch, people might not notice and they will continue to carry, even though carrying has become forbidden. I mean, I don't personally, I don't understand this because like, how are you gonna tie a animal to be like a post for your Eruv? Isn't that like Sarbal Chayla? That's just like you keep an animal in place for 25 hours of Shabbos, but seemingly it seems to work. I'm not exactly sure how, but it's not my it's not my department. It's not my place to argue the Tanaim of the Mishnah. I don't understand it. Rabbi Yossi Oser, however, Rabbi Yossi forbids using a living creature as a pole because it might die and become shorter than 10 tvach. Again, he's addressing the different issue, not even talking about Sarbal Chaim, but I think I like his opinion more. That's not for me to say, but that's it anyways. Okay. Now we talk about using. Now we sidetrack a little bit. We talk about using a living creature in two other areas of halacha. One is the cover of a grave, which is tamei and can transmit tumah, um and okay, tamei mishum golel. A living creature transmits tumah if it was used as the cover of a grave. Rabbi Meir Mataher, Rabbi Meir says that it is tahor because it cannot become tamei. It certainly does not transmit tumah because living item, an animal generally does not become tamei. Animals, especially the living, if they're dead, that's their story. And the Kosville love Gittin, and we can also write the worst documents on a living creature. Rabbi Yossi Glili Posel, however, Rabbi Yossi Glili rules that such a divorce document is is possible, is invalid, because a get has to be written on parchment, and that's from a dead animal and not from a living animal. Okay, Mishnaches. Here we go. Shiara Shechanta, if a caravan, a group of travelers, camped in an open plain before Shabbos, like in a field, and they surrounded their camp with animal gear such as saddles and blankets, creating um, creating a makeshift fence in which there are many gaps. The may carry in the camp. As long as the fence is at least 10 tvachim high, the law you perches al abingan, and the total width of all the gaps is not more than the total width of all the solid parts. If the total width of the gaps is more than the total width of the solid parts, then the mechitza is possible. Any gap that is 10 amos wide or less is permitted. It does not disqualify the mechitza. Because it is considered like an entrance that was built into the wall rather than a breach that destroys the wall. Usher. However, a gap that is more than 10 amos wide is usher. It disqualifies any partition that one that is mostly solid because it's too wide to be viewed as an entrance and is regarded as a breach instead. Okay, two more to go. Makifin Shlosha Chavalim. They may alternatively surround the camp with 3 horizontal ropes attached to posts driven into the ground. One rope on top of the other. As long as there is no gap of 3 tvachim or more between one rope and the next, or between the bottom rope and the ground, meaning that the highest rope must be within 3 tvachim of the middle rope, and the middle rope must be within 3 tvachim of the lowest rope, and the lowest rope must be within 3 tvachim of the ground. such a mechitza is considered to be entirely solid because the gap of less than 3 tvachim between objects is considered to be closed all the way. If it's more than 3 tvachim, that's considered open. Shiur chaval the avyan yaser al tefach. The thickness of all 3 ropes together must be more than a tefach. Today shehei akol asar tvachim, so that the total height of the fence is at least 10 tvachim, which is the minimum height of a mechitza. As stated above, I stated previously, the gaps between the adjacent ropes and the gaps between the lowest ropes are and the ground must as we said must each be less than 3 tvachim, making the total a bit less than 9 tvachim. Therefore, the combined thickness of all the ropes must be a bit more than 1 tefach in order to give the partition a total height of 10 tvachim. And finally, Mishnah Yud, Makivim Bekanim, they may alternatively surround the camp with vertical posts driven into the ground without any horizontal ropes. As long as there's no gap of 3 tvachim between one post and the next. If all the posts are within three tvachim of each other, then the partition is valid even though it is almost entirely open, because spaces narrower than 3 tvachim are not viewed as gaps. Debro, when the Chachamim permitted these partitions, they spoke only of a caravan. But that's a group of at least three people traveling together. They can use such partitions, but 1 or 2 people may not. This is according to Yehuda. Chachamim omrim lo divrei shayara ela behove. They mentioned a caravan because that is the most common circumstance. But according to the Chachamim, even a lone traveler can use these inferior mechitzas. But they only mentioned the caravan because they are more likely to erect partitions of this type that can be used by anyone. Any partition that does not have both vertical and horizontal parts is not considered a mechitza, unless a partition, and the Rabbi Yossi by Rabbi Yehuda. These are the words of Rabbi Yossi by Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachamim say that either one of these 2 things suffice. You could have shesi, you could have erev, you could have vertical, you could have horizontal. You don't need to have both. And lastly, Arba Devarim Pachu B'Machane, the Chachamim granted exemptions from 4 laws regarding soldiers that are stationed in a military camp during war. They can bring wood from anywhere and is not considered theft. And they are potter from having to wash their hands before eating bread, and from the isser of eating the mai. The mai did not, we know what the mai is, where it's a suffix, whether the mices were taken from it or not, and therefore the rest of the world is machmir on it. But the Chachamim did not issue this because they were to the soldiers. To give them a little bit of a cooler, the Eiruvin, and they also freed them from the obligation to make an Eiruvin to allow carrying from one tent to another. They did this, as a cooler for the soldiers, so they can carry between their tents in their camp. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we finished Perek Aleph. Tomorrow we'll do Perek Beis. Tomorrow's the Tainus, and have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for joining us.